Claire is an Australian woman who arrives in Berlin hoping to find some form of life experience there which she couldn't discover back home. She's self-aware enough to recognize how cliched that is, but has still chosen to take the plunge and pursue her passion on another continent. As soon as Claire arrives, she attempts to befriend the people she encounters, demonstrating how solitary and vulnerable she feels. She spends her first night in Berlin on a rooftop with a group of unfamiliar people, and as the morning arrives, Claire takes photos of the city in the golden hour of dawn. The next day, Claire walks around the city, buys a few souvenirs at a flea market, and continues to take pictures. She takes a break in a bookstore, flipping through a monograph about Gustav Klimt, and when she leaves, Claire bumps into Andy. They have a pleasant moment together, he chats her up and she sees right through him, but they end up spending pretty much the entire day together. Claire tells him that the reason she's there is that she wants to photograph GDR architecture and create a book from it, but Andy doesn't understand her fascination with it. He tells her that he's an English teacher at a sports college. He drives her back to the hostel that night, and she tells him that she will be going to Dresden the next day, and before she exits the car, they almost kiss, but he halts and says goodbye. The next day, Claire seems hesitant to go to Dresden as planned, and she searches for the bookstore where she first saw him. To little surprise, Andy is at the bookstore, where she finds him flipping through a Klimt monograph and starts talking to him. In the next scene, they're having a beer at a local pub and discussing her photography. He's the next generation Berliner who doesn't seem too interested in the politics of East Germany, and she can't tell that he might actually have some history connected to those times that has shaped him that way. They discuss that until he discovers a pendant with a wedding ring on it. The ring was given to Claire by her mother, who told her that if she encounters trouble, she could always sell it and return home. Later, the two of them are in his vehicle because Andy is driving Claire to his flat in a deserted building. The place is crumbling, and she immediately notices how quiet it is since no one lives there anymore. They walk into his apartment, and she takes a look at it, noticing that the doors don't open. Andy approaches Claire as she's staring out of the window. They begin to kiss and undress each other, then go to his bedroom and sleep together. Afterward, Andy tells her that he wishes they could remain like that forever, where they still don't know each other. Claire says she wishes they could stay there forever as well. The next day, Andy is seen at his workplace, giving a lecture to high school students. He asks the students about the required reading they had over the weekend and instructs Franca to respond. She's clearly read the book, so she clarifies the question in detail, despite her broken English. Meanwhile, Claire wakes up in the apartment and gets dressed, but when she goes to leave, she notices that the doors are locked and she can't find a key anywhere. During her search around the apartment, she discovers a locked room and some red nail varnish in the bathroom, as well as a school photo of Andy. Claire is irritated at being trapped in the apartment all day, unaware that this is just the start of her troubles. Andy leaves work and bumps into Peter and Jana, who ask him to join them for a drink. He declines the invitation and tells them that he has to meet someone later because Peter insists. When Andy returns home, he finds Claire making tea and telling him that she couldn't locate the key to the place. She inquires if he even left one out for her, and Andy pretends that he merely forgot to place it on the table. They head out to a venue that night, and Claire still believes he's a kind person. They spend the night together, and the following morning he leaves a key for her on the dresser. Claire gets up when he leaves the apartment and grabs some breakfast when she notices another Klimt book in his kitchen. Inside the book, she discovers a photograph of a woman with the words, "Mine," written on her back. Naturally, that unsettles Claire, so she checks her own back for the same inscription and finds one there as well. She immediately tries the key that Andy had left for her, only to find that it doesn't work. The windows are also stuck, and her only other option is to grab her phone and charge it to call for help. Unfortunately, just as she powers up the phone, she sees that Andy has removed her SIM card. Suddenly, Claire realizes that she's not a guest in his apartment, but possibly a captive. She grabs one of the chairs and attempts to break open a window, but soon realizes that he anticipated that possibility as well, so the glass is reinforced. Claire waits at the door for Andy, but doesn't manage to escape as he returns, making it seem as if she is unaware of what's happening. He doesn't reply to her request to open the door, and only starts talking when he sees the mess through the window. Claire tries to address him calmly, but he simply tells her that if she attempts to break the windows again, he'll have to board them up. Andy begins preparing dinner as if everything is normal while she tries to reason with him. He tells her that she's the one who wanted to stay instead of going to Dresden, but Claire argues that it was just something she mentioned after they spent the night together and that it doesn't mean anything. After a while, Claire loses her composure and tries to force him to open the door, but the maniac manages to overpower her and tells her that no one can hear her. Andy continues with his routine over the next few days, as if nothing has occurred, and visits his father at one of his lectures. Feeling bored at the lecture, he wants to look at photos he's taken of Claire when his father questions him about his views on East Germany. The two have dinner together and bicker about minor issues when Andy speaks that he has met someone. His father inquires about what happened to the other one, and when Andy explains that she went back to Canada and the new one is Australian, his father wonders why he always chooses tourist girls. Meanwhile, it is evident that he has been confining her on the bed wrapped in plastic with only a towel beneath her. One night, when he returns to the apartment after a run, he is seen placing his keys in a locker containing all of her important documents and belongings. Andy frees Claire from the restraints and presents her with what he has purchased for her. He also mentions that he told his father about them and that he texted her mother to inform her that she is okay. As Claire stands up with urine all over her, she says that she's not alright and that her mother will figure out where she is because she has paid for drinks with her card. While taking a shower, she discovers blonde hair in the drain, indicating she wasn't the first one to stay there. Later, Andy is restraining her back to the bed, taking photographs of her when she asks him not to confine her again because she can't go anywhere anyway. Before he leaves for work, he stores the keys in the locker and positions the locker over the front door. Claire immediately begins searching through the apartment for a weapon or anything similar that she might use until she discovers a screwdriver under the sofa. Meanwhile, Andy is at work conversing with Peter and Jana. When he notices that she has his mug, she apologizes and cleans it for him, then touches his hand as she returns it, causing him to act oddly about it. Andy washes his arm from her touch. When he returns to the apartment, Claire is assembling the puzzle he bought for her. She makes him sit down and assist her with it when she notices the keys in his hand. As soon as Andy places one of his hands down to put a piece on the board, Claire pins him to the table with the screwdriver. She grabs the keys and manages to escape the apartment. Andy retrieves the screwdriver and chases her down the stairs, catching up to her when she reaches the door. As Claire struggles to escape, Andy slams the door on her hand and fractures her fingers. Claire loses consciousness from the pain, and he drags her back, leaving her on the floor while he tends to his own injury. Later, Andy visits his father, who mentions that his mother called to inquire about him. This is when we learn that Andy has issues with his mother because she avoided them and left them behind. One night, Claire tells him that she misses her mother, and he responds that there is no use in missing something she can't reclaim, especially since she has him. Andy takes more photographs of her and brings them into the locked room, where Claire hears unusual sounds coming from. Later, while he's at work, Claire tries to pick the lock of the room, only to have the paperclip break inside, which he will undoubtedly notice. Meanwhile, Andy is at work conducting a gym class when he notices one of the students, Franca, exercising. He has an unsettling moment observing her, and the girl realizes he's watching her as well, evident on his injured hand. It has already been a significant amount of time since Claire was imprisoned there. Andy uses the scissors to trim Claire's nails and removes the bandage from her injured hand. He tells her that he would never harm her in the worst way she can imagine because they are a team. Moments later, he's washing her in the shower as Franca arrives at the apartment complex and can enter because the Coleman has opened the door. When she knocks on the door, Andy covers Claire's mouth and warns her that he'll kill Franca if she screams. He steps out to speak with the girl who has a crush on him, and Claire appears behind him. Andy tells Franca that Claire is his girlfriend and ridicules her for having any interest in him. He sends the confused girl, who noticed him staring at her, away and tells Claire her name. He turns her around, cuts her hair as well, and takes another photograph of her. When he realizes that he can't easily open the room, Claire becomes frightened that he might do something. Andy returns to the apartment on another night and brings Claire a gift of lingerie, which she has no choice but to model for him. After a few moments of feigning, she starts acting as if she'll fight him. The man is disheartened, so he asks her if she can't just behave normally, to which Claire pointedly replies that he's abnormal. Andy assaults her, and as Claire gets dressed, she discovers nail clippings under the bed. Since he became angry with her, Andy goes to stay at his father's house. Meanwhile, there is a power outage at the apartment. Claire gets cold quickly because it's already winter and snow has begun to fall. The next morning, Andy tries to wake his father when he realizes that he has passed away. He cleans up his house and searches for some toenail clippers. When he finds them, he trims his father's toenails while Claire is simultaneously painting her own nails and trying to keep warm. Since the gas stove is still operational, she is able to feed herself while she's confined in the apartment without her captor. Andy remains at his father's place with the deceased body for a few days, tending to him and his house, leaving Claire alone to wonder not when she'll be able to escape, but when he'll return. She keeps discovering mementos left behind by the others before her. After Andy finishes and tidies everything at his father's, he comes back to the apartment. Claire is stunned to see him because she thought he would never return. He tells her that his father has died, and she tries to console him. They sleep together. As Christmas and New Year approach, the two of them appear to get along and play house. Andy even buys her some books as a gift with the note that to him, she is perfect. This prompts Claire to ask him how he chose her, and he tells her that he simply saw her pausing on the street, looking at something. Then she asks how he selected the previous girl before her, and when he lies that there was none, she tells him that she knows that isn't true. Claire asks if he still thinks about her, and he says that he doesn't. They have a discussion in which she recounts a childhood story, but he seems disinterested. Later, he gives her his father's dog as a gift. One day, he takes her out for a walk in the woods, and she doesn't attempt to flee because he's also carrying an axe. After a short while, he prepares to kill her when a boy suddenly calls out to them. He asks for their assistance because his brother is injured, so Andy goes to check on him. Claire approaches the boy who called them over and starts urging him to get her help because she's in trouble. Unfortunately, the boy doesn't understand English and becomes angry with her for grabbing at him. Suddenly, their mother arrives and calls the children back as Andy retrieves the axe. He makes Claire return to him and then takes her back to the car, putting her in the trunk. Later, when he sees how much affection Claire has for the dog, Andy takes it away from her and releases it, telling her it escaped. On New Year's Eve, Andy goes to Peter's and Jana's party. He becomes a bit anxious when he sees how many people are there. Meanwhile, Claire finally unlocks the door of the secured room. There, she finds his photo album with all the pictures he took of her. Claire realizes that the strange noises she heard came from a reclining massage chair. Next to it, she discovers another photo album with images from his childhood. At the end of that album, she sees photos of the girl he had confined in there before her. Suddenly, Claire hears fireworks outside because the new year has arrived. Andy isn't enjoying the party much, so he goes to wash the dishes in the kitchen, where he has an odd exchange with Jana. He asks her why she throws herself at him and other men, and Jana asks him to leave because she's offended and frightened. As Andy exits the party, he spots another tourist girl outside and tries to chat her up too. She laughs at him for making a small error in the wording of his question, and then her friend calls her over because their taxi has arrived. He drives home, glancing at other women, probably looking for a new victim. Meanwhile, Claire notices someone in the apartment across from the one she's in and manages to draw their attention. The man quickly walks over to the apartment, but as he's trying to open the door, Andy returns and strikes him on the head. When the man is down, he hits him again to finish him off. He makes Claire assist him in cleaning up and wrapping the body in some plastic. Moments later, he takes the body out and places it in a trash can, pouring gasoline over it and setting it ablaze. Claire observes the fire from the apartment. In the next scene, Andy is boarding up the windows in the apartment to prevent her from doing something like that again, and completes tidying up the place. Later, Andy is reading the local newspaper when he sees an article about Claire being missing, so he tells her to pack all of her belongings because he will be having the apartment fumigated. Before she starts packing, she notices him grating Franca's paper. She burns her hand to attract his attention, and when he goes to the bathroom to get some kind of burn ointment, Claire hides the notebook under the sink. Later, he takes the papers he's evaluating as well as all her belongings and departs, leaving her there. He then descends to the basement and shuts off all the water in the flat. The following day, he hands back the graded notebooks to his pupils, including Franca. When she opens hers, she discovers a picture of Claire, which she had managed to slip in the previous evening. The girl understands what that signifies and requests to use the restroom, taking it with her. Regrettably, the picture drops from her notebook and some of the other pupils find it. When Franca realizes she has lost the picture, she grabs her bicycle and heads to his residence. Back in the classroom, the students students circulate the picture, and when it eventually reaches Andy, he panics and speeds home as quickly as possible. Andy arrives at the apartment complex and notices Franca's bicycle there, as well as an ajar window. Upon entering the yard, he observes that the girls have managed to open the box, and he swiftly ascends to check if Claire is still present. Andy doesn't locate either of them in the apartment, but when he hears noises upstairs, he follows the sounds, prepared to confront. As soon as he enters the apartment on the next floor, Claire calls him back down. Andy looks for her inside, but she conceals herself, waiting for him to go deeper into the apartment. At one point, while he's in his special room, she calls out to him, just so he can see her locking him inside the apartment. Claire has taken all of her documents from the box and leaves him confined inside. She goes to the other flat to retrieve Franca, assists her in emerging from a closet where she concealed herself, and reassures her for not recognizing it earlier. The final scene of the film is of Claire driving around Berlin and feeling the breeze on her skin. She was likely confined in that apartment for a year, and now she's finally liberated.